The world won't understand you. Hey, but it's okay. Said the world won't understand you, 'cause I made you in my own way. Said the world won't understand you, 'cause I made you different. Life may move fast, or it may move slow. I met a silly man who said he'd make it slow. We look up out towards space, or even at the sky. One that gets away, but never look inside. Breathe in, breathe out. Life is a maze, but we'll figure this out. I mean, human beings, I ain't got no doubt.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Hope you guys are all well. I'm not sure if I'm gonna make this into a podcast episode yet. This is very informal. But if so, welcome to episode 50. I actually wanted to do something special for the 50th episode. So I'm supposed to interview this friend tomorrow. So, but if not, if I make this into an episode, then welcome to episode 50. And I guess he'll just have to be episode 51, right? And I'm really looking forward to that interview. But so yeah, it's a great feeling to have hit the 50th episode. It's something I kind of set my mind on, right? I wanted to do episode 50 and then it'd probably take a break, but it looks like I'm just going to keep going. So it's a great milestone for me. I remember when I was going to throw in the top after like the third or something episode. And so it's beautiful to be at this point, right? And especially this being such a productive year. So what I did want to talk about, I actually made a list, so I'm not all over the place just like I was right now. But so I wanted to talk about quite a few things, but Mercury Retrograde first, since it's first on my list. Yesterday was actually the 23rd and first day of Mercury Retrograde. I don't know what I was trying to do to combine the two words, but it was funny because, even though you don't believe in stuff, like, and when it happens and then you see like, what? Oh, it's Mercury Retrograde. Like, that's comedy, right? So first I had done the previous interview, right? Episode 49. And everything was going wrong, like technology-wise with it, right? Which is what they say, right? Mercury retrograde affects communication and electronics and all this stuff. And so my computer, I left it. Sometimes it has taken maybe 8 hours even to export, right? Like a longer, because the episode was almost 3 hours. And so sometimes when it's hot, my computer will take that long. And it has lasted overnight, right? Where I'll leave it, right? Especially when I have a lot of little edits or something. And so what do you call it? I left it overnight and then it was like, what the hell? And then so it ended up taking over 24 hours to export, right? And it went into the morning of Mercury retrograde. And I didn't want to hit stop because I was like, I didn't want to hit stop because it was like it had already gone halfway. I was like, I don't want to start over, right? So I just left it. And then after all that, I ended up having to chop it down, right? I think it ended up being a little under 2 hours, and it was, almost 3 hours long. So I ended up having to do that. And even when I had the whole thing of almost 3 hours, then YouTube gave me an error, which it never has, right? When I'm uploading, it said like upload error. So all that stuff was happening, and I was just like, wow, am I not supposed to upload this episode or what? So all that stuff was happening. And then on the night of Mercury retrograde yesterday, they turned the power off from like, I don't know what maintenance thing they were doing, even though that was like, they had sent a message out, I don't know, like a month ago that they were going to start doing some kind of, power outages, on purpose. I know my brother, they did it, like where he lives, they did it about, maybe right before Hillary or right after, I don't know. So he had, they did it over there. And then, so I guess they chose last night here, which was pretty crazy, right? So all that stuff on Mercury retrograde, dealing with stuff like that, right? And then it was funny because I was trying to go to sleep. I was like, oh, this is actually peaceful. Wow, okay, the silence. Maybe I can meditate. Maybe I'll have some really vivid experiences tonight. And then you hear the car alarm go off. Then dogs start barking and nonstop. They were just barking and barking and barking. And I was just like, oh, man. I even actually, like, I got up and did like the comforting thing, which I never really do, and I was just like so frustrated that I couldn't sleep until on my phone, I finally was like, all right, because I didn't want to waste the battery on my phone in case of emergency. So I put one of those sleeping sound stuff, and then that's how I finally knocked out, right? I know that's a little TMI, but I just want to talk about that Mercury retrograde, how it's funny. Like, first, all that stuff with the thing, right? That was unheard of. Like, over 24 hours to export a video. It was just insane, right? And so all that stuff, right? All that stuff was going on. So I just tripped out. But what I really wanted to talk about was, all these things that have been going on with like the spirit animals, right? I know a lot of you guys know about spirit animals. So the spirit animal stuff started right before Hillary. I think the day before, because I didn't know how long it was gonna last. I took my dog for a hike and I found a little dead bird, right? And it's crazy when they look like that. It looks like there's nothing wrong with it, like no bite marks, no nothing. It's just there laying peacefully, complete. And so it's like, okay. This has happened before. There's been days where it was like I found a dead bird, then a dead squirrel, then a dead bird at the door of my car, and I'm like, what the, like, just crazy, just nonstop. Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, okay, I get it. And even a squirrel the same, right, intact, like nothing. It looks almost like you could take it home and put it on on a desk or something. Like they look so perfect. So that's happened a lot of times, and so I've already researched into the dead animals lots of times, right? It's like a transmutation, right? Like sometimes it has to do with the energy of that animal, or just letting you know that your transformation is basically in the process or complete, pretty much, right? Like you've transformed into something else, right? And so first I found that dead bird. Then the next day when Hillary had started, I went out to feed my dog, and boom, she had left me a little dead bird right there on right there, like right when I stepped outside, and I was like, oh man, I felt bad for that one, but I got the hint. I was like, okay, because I forgot to look up, because I always forget, like, and I know I'm supposed to go back and brush up and, okay, what is this dead animal? What is it trying to tell me? And then so there was a dead animal. Then the next day again, the bird, and which was, even since my dog left it, it's more like in your face, like, okay, so I get it. I'm really going through this transformation. And then, like the day after Hillary, I went on a bike ride, and then there was all these frogs, right? There was a live frogs, and then, oh yeah, but right before Hillary, so I think I took my dog on a hike. Then I went on a bike ride, and I went off, real quick. I know it's TMI, but just like, off trail real quick to like relieve myself. Boom, a coyote pops up. And then on the way back on this bike trail, but like alongside the mountains, then the like three frogs pop out, but it was in a place where, if I would have, it would have caused a pile up. So I didn't even stop to take video or pictures, which was my first time after being there for a few years that I saw frogs. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. The coyote and the frogs. Okay, so I don't even know if this was before the first dead bird or what, but it was like the dead bird, the coyote, the frogs, and the frogs is all about, obviously they're little tadpoles and they turn into these frogs. It's almost like the relationship between us, like in the physical and spirit world, the way the frog is from water to land, and then the transformation, all this stuff. So there's just so many meanings with the frog. We know about frog medicine, for indigenous people. And it takes you into that higher dimension, right? Into that state of consciousness where you could tap into the other dimensions and all that, right? So frog is very important in that way. So the coyote, the frog, the dead birds, all this stuff was happening. And so then after the day after Hillary, when I went, and there was all these frogs, never in my life have I seen, there was hundreds of frogs. I probably passed at least like 100 live ones. Hopefully I didn't run over any, because they were all on the road. I was swerving. But then as I went along the path, man, there was just so many dead ones. I'd say at least like 500. I didn't want to exaggerate and go like thousands, but there was hundreds, probably at least 500. There was just all that. And I took pictures of it, but I don't want to post it because it's something sad. It looked like a cartoon. That's why it was crazy, the way the frogs just smashed, on this path. But talk about the dead animal thing, like the transmutation. Like, wow, okay, that was insane, right? And you don't think of the frog like just like another insect or something. Like a frog's a frog, right? It has so many meanings to it. That seeing all these little smashed frogs was crazy, and some were a little bigger too. So I was like, damn. But anyway, so the frog, even, right? Like the frog, the frog medicine, like I said, it takes you into those different states of consciousness. But and then the other stuff I said about the frog. But even it talked about your skin, how I guess frogs go in and out of their skin very quickly. or I don't know how quickly, but they do it a lot, right? Not just once. They shed their skin, and so it's kind of sensitive. So it. I listened to this lady, and she was talking about. She happened to mention both the live frog and the dead frog. So when she was talking about the dead frog, I think that's where she was saying about how the skin too, and kind of stepping into that of being comfortable with who you are, right? And lately, like, I don't know if it's the first time in my life, but I've been really embracing all aspects of me, right? Like, I even started sharing like some of my music stuff on like my podcast channel, right? On this channel, I posted like, or posting about the book, because I've had already, I have like a personal channel that I have of YouTube. I have my music channel, and then I have the podcast channel, which I consider like my spiritual channel. And before, I would start spiritual channels and delete them and all this stuff, right? Before I really had felt like comfortable. But right now it's like at a whole nother level. Like, and it's not to be mean or nothing, but I just don't care. I really don't care what people think. Like, it just doesn't matter to me anymore, right? Like, I am who I am. Like, it's crazy to get that perspective of like, it's almost like the whole, like, it's funny because my very first song on the first album that I released, I literally say that. I go, let he who is free of sin cast the first stone. Just don't hit me, mother bleep, or else it's on, So it was like, just the way I started even my very first thing with music, right? It was like to show, like, I acknowledged my path, right? Like, this is me. This is my path in life. I'm not perfect. I know you're not perfect, whether you're delusional about it or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, if someone really believes that they're perfect, then it's fine. Let them cast that first stone. But it's fine. You hit me. I'm not talking about like, oh, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, right? Like that kind of stuff. I'm saying like, go ahead, cast your stones. But if you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. Like that's all I'm saying. Like I'm not gonna just turn cheeks. I'm not gonna this and that. Like I know my life is filled with things of and I acknowledge that's what I agreed to. See, that's the whole thing about the other level now of consciousness is to realize, especially all that, right? For it to have come to a climate, an apex, or whatever, to have reached this point, right? This is that what it's called? To have reached this like a climax, I guess. To have reached this point or pinnacle or whatever of everything I was shown, right? From even all the boom extra steps that happened from when my brother passed to now, everything just about how that's my way. And I think I always knew, right? My way of reaching people is I agreed. I agreed to go through stuff. I cuss sometimes. I don't care. I was never meant to be I'm the spiritual person because, that's especially the coyote. That's what it's always meant. A coyote is a huge thing for me. It's really tied into everything about me, right? The coyote has been like a companion for me, and it always appears when there's these big changes. And the coyote is known as a trickster, right? But in the way that things will happen in my life on purpose to push me, and then once that transition happens, then it's like, oh, and then I'll run into a coyote will appear out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, you bastard! Like I need like all this stuff, just the way it all room, like the universe made sure that this happened, right? And so sometimes it's like that. It's like I'll go through things, but there was a lesson to it, right? Like for example, me writing books, me making an album, me doing music. It's always like the way it happens is so perfectly divinely orchestrated. Like something triggers it and then it happens and then it's like, oh wow, So that's why that was meant to happen. Even the podcast, when it happened, it was like all the events that happened for me to make the podcast. It was insane. Oh, I think, back then, see, I and even that part of my life, right? Like when I had to, I was doing the Uber stuff, like and I've said it now, I think in interviews, but I think for a while, I was kind of I didn't want to say it, right? Maybe I felt like not ashamed, right? Because it is what it is, right? Like I was working, but at the same time, I was going through stuff. Wow, the whole story, I don't know. Maybe I'll share it right now, maybe I won't. But it was a lot to do with like all this pandemic stuff, right? But anyways, even when I started the Uber thing, I mean, when I started the podcast, it was crazy. That day, it was insane. It was like So now I could talk about it now because, like I said before, I didn't even want anybody to know I was doing that, and so I'm not doing it no more. Like I don't care, but I was, doing the Uber thing, right? So, uh, I went to pick up an order. That's how it divinely orchestrated it was, right? It was like I went to pick up an order, and then I think the person's name was like my brother's name, right? And then the the address I think was like, the date my brother passed, which I wrote a book about, like 216 or something. Or that day was crazy. It was like already like 5 different times. It was like I went to one, it was like my brother's name. I went to another one, it was my brother's name. And it was just so insane. Then one, it wasn't even my brother's name. As I was waiting for the order, they called the guy with my brother's name. And then it was like 216. Then I did another 216 in another place. Then finally I got to this address, and I think it was either my brother's name or the date he passed away was the address, the 216, and then the street was called Goodway. And then it was almost like telepathic, like something just told me, like Goodway, in a good way. And I was like, and it just like that simple. Boom! I started the podcast like with the name In a Good Way podcast on that day, on that moment. And it's weird that how do you get all of that? Like how do you deliver? Like with my brother's name, the address, and then the street was called Goodway. How do I how did I get the message? Like, oh, start a podcast. I don't know. See, that's why those things. I know people call them downloads. I can't stand that. Like, not I can't stand it. So no offense to anybody that likes using the word download. Just like, I guess it's just my little fight against that, like the AI and all this stuff. Like, I'm not a freaking computer, even though I guess we technically, it's kind of like we do operate like a computer, right? But it's just the knowing, right? Like, I think I like that one better. Just the knowing, right? All of a sudden, you've telepathically communicated, whether it's to wherever, other dimensions, other somehow, boom, they give you the knowing, right? So I think that's the one I'll use, right? The knowing. So that's even when I started the podcast, just the way everything's divinely orchestrated. I don't know. I think I went off topic either way. Uh oh yeah, even I had put it about the Mercury retrograde. Even when I did the interview, I noticed I had tried out my mic for the first time on an interview because usually it sounds clear, and I thought I had adjusted the volume. So even that, like on the last interview, like my voice was all low, but at least the person I interviewed, their voice was clear, so I didn't want to or have to go in and adjust all the levels. I was like, you know what, it's fine, let me just leave it. So all that stuff happened with the Mercury retrograde that I was like, geez, all right. So I think that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about, right? Like I said, I really wanted to make a whole video about the frog because there's so many meanings to it, but that was at the end. But just because it was tied into so many things, right? You had the coyote, the birds, and then out of all things, today someone sends me, like a couple of days ago, they had sent me like a little photo of a hummingbird nest. I was like, what? Like two little hummingbird eggs. So I was all excited. I was like, wow, that's an awesome, beautiful thing, right? And then they sent me a video of the hummingbird sitting on the little. So I've never seen that in person. I've never, I'm maybe seen it in a video, but I've never seen it in person. Or someone sent me like a video that they took, right? The hummingbird sitting on these eggs. And then today they send me a picture of one of the little hummingbirds was born, right? So you see one egg next to it, and then the other one, it already hatched. So the little hummingbird's born. And I thought, like, wow, how perfect. Like, right, all this transformation started. And that was my first spirit animal, right? That I connected with, the hummingbird, right? The very first one that I was like, wait, okay, these hummingbirds keep appearing at the craziest time, and they seem to, like, they're communicating with me, right? So what's going on? So it's the first spirit animal that really caught my attention and that I looked up, right? And I started researching. And so it's funny that all this transformation in the hummingbird, I mean, damn, it's like the messenger, the this, the that, everything about the hummingbird. So seeing this new life of the hummingbird after all these death, right? Death. And then to become, boom, like, because that's even like, that's one of the Aztec legends, right? About how the warriors would turn into hummingbirds, right? And the hummingbirds, like, was the only bird that would fly through. Even though I know there's stories about other birds too, but that, it will fly between the spirit world and this world, right? Because to deliver the messages, right? And it was the souls of the warriors. So that's beautiful that out of all things, this new life, this new birth, it's like a hummingbird. And I got to see that today. So I was like, oh wow, all this stuff makes sense. Like boom, 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 boom. Like it's all made sense. So I just want to say that. I don't know if I was all over the place. Hopefully that made sense. I was really excited about all these transformations. And like I said, that's what it meant for me, like with the frog, right? Because the way they explained it, um, it was about how something about the skin, right? Like you feeling comfortable in your skin and being yourself. Also, that to be away from toxic people. So I've been more, it's really sad because I'm still trying to figure it out, right? I want to help people, but at the same time, there's some people that like they just stay in the same cycle. And at some point, it's like I don't know what to do. You know what I'm like? I really don't know at what point. Like I can't, because it almost feels like some people don't. I get it. Sometimes things are hard, right? And sometimes, but when some people just don't want to change, and I guess because I'm sensitive to that, so I can't really be around the toxicity, right? Because then it kind of like, and now the frog has a lot to do with. That's why I'm bringing it up, not because me just being so. It was like almost the frog being that message to like, hey, yeah, remember, like it's not even that. See, now it's not even. It doesn't even feel like a choice of me. It's like my body and my spirit is demanding, like, hey, like we get it, but I mean, I don't know. Like at some point, like I'm the last one to ever really suggest some people may need therapy and stuff like that. But I think like, hey, like obviously, right? Like there was a man that once, I went once to like some therapy, but it was like for couples counseling, right? Someone I was dating suggested we get couples counseling, and I got it free from work, and they suggested, like I think we briefly talked about some stuff, and I talked about how people would back then, right, like years ago, over a decade ago, like how people would always call me with like their problems, and he told me like I get paid for. I don't know if he had been doing it for 20 or 30 years, but he's I know what you're talking, and he's I get paid for this. I wouldn't recommend basically doing that, because and it's cool to be a friend and everything, but not to the point where, I guess my advice would be like what the frog taught me, right? Is like sometimes if you're feeling it, if it's affecting you to that point, then don't feel bad about having to take care of yourself and your health, right? Like spiritual health. I mean, spiritual health bleeds out into physical health, right? So it's all tied in. So the frog was bringing me that message as well, like because of that, how the skin changes. It's always kind of sensitive, and so like you really can't. Your soul will demand that you not really be around toxic environments. You know what I'm saying? So that was an interesting lesson, which I just have to be stronger now, even with the boundaries, right? Like I have to even be stronger with boundaries, And I guess maybe this is my safe way of doing it. I could teach like anything I need to teach through these podcasts or songs or different stuff. But at the same time, you know, like I want people to do better, but at some point people have to treat it like an ongoing war, right? Like and so people will stop this, and that's how it is, right? If you've ever seen like in like war movies, right? Like a sniper will shoot, and you could look it up, I'm sure, on YouTube, and maybe there'll just be like the accounts of real life stories of like where a sniper shot someone, and then when they go to help him, boom, 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 he takes out the other people trying to rescue the one guy, right? So now instead of just one guy, by just wounding the one, he just ended up killing like five, right? Like that's how in war it is. So someone that's not to say like, but when there's things, see, I get it when it's not, I don't want to see, it's hard because I don't want to sound insensitive, right? But it's like if you're not willing to do that change for the betterment of the community, I get it that people do go through stuff, right? There are so many unforeseen things, right? The pandemic was a perfect example of that, right? Like I lost things and this and that, and I had help from people, right? But sometimes there's this thing of like, I don't know, everybody just has to figure it out, right? Like and there's nothing wrong with helping people, I guess. I don't know. I feel like somehow maybe this didn't really come out how I wanted to say it, but I guess let me just cut all that to say the frog taught me that important lesson, that me moving forward too, you know, um, it's probably telling me like I just have to really be aware of who I have around me, right? So I'll sum it up to that. So for me, the frog also was showing me that to really be aware of my community, right? Like, and that's why I'm not gonna go into the other. So I will talk about it probably soon about certain things that I went through during the whole pandemic, because YouTube censored a video. I think a video of mine on 2 different channels, right? That I was trying to talk about the pandemic thing, and now like I think it's time to talk about it. So I'll share about that, right? But you know, I feel like now I have you know, I'm around a pretty good community to you know, discuss spiritual things. So I'm pretty happy with that, right? Like that now I have I feel supported in that way, right? Like that I could be very open about the things I experience spiritually, and not just on this podcast, right? But just people that I know now, and so it's very good, right? So I experience you know, I'm pretty much being outcasted from what you feel was like a supportive community, which then turned out not to be. So I understand those kind of unforeseen events, right? Uh, but yeah, I won't talk about it till the next episode. So thank you all. Thank you for listening to my little rant all over the place. Maybe I won't make it a podcast episode because of all that, and I'll just leave it as just a video. And thank you for listening. I hope you guys are all well. Hopefully, I don't know, you know, if you got anything about the frog from that, but I just want to share the little things, right? So thank you. Peace.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I want to feel this way forever.